as the year 2022 draws to a close, it's kind of around that time to retrospect and think about what were the fragrances that I wore the most in this past year. And after assessing what I have in my collection and really just taking a comprehensive look at the fragrances that I wore the most, I was actually quite astonished that some of the fragrances in this list eventually made their way into this list. I didn't suspect at all that I would have worn some of these fragrances so much, but in any case, in today's video, I'm going to be going over my top 10 most worn fragrances of 2022. Some fragrances in this list might surprise you as they surprised me. I'm excited to share this list with you very soon, so make sure to stay tuned. Now, before I begin today's episode and I tell you about these 10 most worn fragrances of the year 2022, this is going to be a nice balance of both designer and niche. I do want to start things off by saying that if you're a fan of fragrance-related content, please do consider supporting the channel by subscribing to it. Hit the bell icon and also click where it says enable all notifications. This way, whenever I do upload these daily videos, they will get delivered straight to your feed. You never have to worry about missing any of my future uploads. And of course, give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, or if you learned something from today's episode, or if you found it entertaining in any way. So these are 10 fragrances that I personally really enjoy. Now, just because these are my most worn fragrances of this past year doesn't necessarily make them my favorite fragrances of this past year. For whatever reason, especially in the case with the majority of them, I found them to be very safe, easygoing, easy to wear, versatile, work appropriate fragrances, and a lot of them, because of that safe, mass appealing vibe that they convey, I just found myself reaching for them far more often than I did reaching for some other fragrances in my collection, especially if I thought that they conveyed a certain air of elegance and professionalism. It just became a lot easier to wear some of these in a work environment over perhaps some other heavy-hitting, resinous, incensey fragrances that I personally love, especially right around this time of the year. I love my ambers, love my resins, you know the deal. So with that being said, let's just go ahead and dive into the list, and I'm going to go ahead and talk to you about the 10 fragrances that I wore the most in 2022. And of course, I have to start things off with a fragrance that I personally released. I wore this more than anything else. I went through about 8 mod bottles of it, and then of course, this is my second bottle of Raised Spirits by Novitus Perform. It is a beautiful fragrance with toffee and pimento leaves and tobacco, vanilla, brown sugar. It's sweet, it's gourmand, composed by Dominique Ropion and Julien Rasconet, two amazing perfumers. And I've been wearing this honestly since May of last year. So I've been wearing this a whole lot, but that comes with the whole perfume evaluation and the creative direction and just wanting to fully understand something and make sure that you 100% love it before you release it out into the public. So Raised Spirits by Novitus Perform became my most worn fragrance, or one of my most worn. And then we also have Creed Aventis. So this is the second bottle of this year. In my lifetime, I've probably had about 8 or 9 bottles. At one point, I had the really big flacon of it, so it's hard to imagine that I went through that entire bottle, but this is probably my 9th bottle of all time, of Creed Aventis, that is. So this is my second bottle of the year. Love it, right? Always gets compliments, very professional, easygoing. It just has that sort of mass appeal about it that you can't go wrong with. And of course, there are a lot of alternatives and dupes on the market, but there's just something about the original Creed Aventis that always hits home, and it does a really good job. Especially when I'm wearing it to work, I always get asked what I'm wearing. Now, in terms of a designer fragrance, this one actually surprised me. I think I purchased this one last year, if I'm not mistaken. I know this year they released the Eau de Parfum of it, but this is Burberry Hero. So Burberry Hero, pepper, 3 types of cedar wood, dark, not sweet at all. So I think what compelled me, or what kind of inspired me to start wearing this more often, is because I guess I bought the bundle of it. And so it came with like the shower gel and the hair wash and whatever. So I started using that a lot in the shower, and I was like, wow, this actually smells pretty good. Like, I think I want to keep that aroma going after I exit the shower. So I think that kind of inspired me to just spray this on, and I found myself, I took this to work and I actually wore this for like a week straight, which is a lot for me. Given the fact that I have almost 3,000 fragrances in my collection, for me to wear the same fragrance for a consecutive week, That does say a lot, especially because I'm always wearing a different fragrance in preparation for me reviewing it. So to wear this for a whole week really said a lot. This next fragrance I actually wore in April, May, and June of this year. There was just something about the tail end of that school year where I found myself really enjoying this one. That touch of citrus in the opening, the lemon, the lime, but also some of these classy facets that are residing in the heart and base. This one is Scandal by Novitus Perform. Just a beautiful fragrance, conveys this gentlemanly and very sort of professional disposition about it. I personally love wearing Scandal. I also wore a lot of Apex actually, and one of my most worn of all time from the Raja brand is Oceania. I just love that fragrance since it came out. I've been wearing it nonstop, but Scandal is one that I wore quite a lot of this past year. I also have been wearing a lot of Gatsby 22 by GOURMAND. So I saw this on Fragrance X for a really good price, and I ended up purchasing it, and it was money very well spent. Not the longest lasting fragrance in the world, but there's something about that jasmine and orange blossom combination that just gives you this breath of fresh air in the opening. It's just so agreeable, and it's just an amazing fragrance in the opening, and it actually dries down to kind of like this Versace pour-homme vibe. Give it a try if you haven't tried this one. It definitely has that compliment factor about it. I've gotten a lot of really positive attention, and especially when I want to feel like I'm living in the 1920s, Gatsby 22 I think is a great fragrance for that. And then the next one also surprised me quite a bit because I've had this fragrance in my collection for a long time, and I recently repurchased it along with a collector's edition, and I said, you know what, I haven't enjoyed this fragrance in a long time, and I smelled it on somebody at my local barber shop, and I was like, man, that fragrance smells good, right? It's been many years since I've actually wore it, considerable amount. Le Male by Jean Paul Gaultier. I don't know, just something about it. I really love Le Male, and I think it's a great fragrance despite the fact that we're still living, or that we are in the year 2022. It's been around for like 3 decades at this point. It's still a great fragrance. I love wearing it. Over the summer, I found myself wearing a lot of The Key by Novitus Perform. Now, this one was creatively directed by Buck Moore, who has a channel called Big Beard Business. Just the grapefruit, the ambroxan, also another fragrance composed by Dominic Ropion. Just an amazing, bright, lively introduction, very fresh and citrusy and super long lasting. For a citrus-based fragrance, I was really surprised. This is the Novitus Perform fragrance that I wore that is only second to Ray Spirits in terms of the frequency. So The Key was an amazing fragrance over the summer. It just always put me in a good mood. It did well on me. And then of course I wore a lot of Green Irish Tweed. I do apologize that some brands are being repeated here, but I was just kind of tackling this list very objectively. You know, there was really not too many subjective elements in terms of, you know, me compiling this list and me choosing what I was going to wear. Certainly that aspect of it was very subjective, but ultimately I was just looking at what did I see myself wearing the most, and Green Irish Tweed, I wore this fragrance maybe like 2 or 3 weeks in a row, and this is going back to like September of this year. So I actually, you know, this is my 2nd or 3rd bottle of Green Irish Tweed. It's a lovely fragrance. I've been wearing it for a long time, but it just did really well on me, especially in a professional setting. And then in September, it was still quite warm, so I was able to really enjoy that lemon verbena, that iris, that citrus in the opening. Very professional fragrance. Of course, it does get compared a lot to Cool Water by Davidoff, same perfumer, Pierre Bourdon. So the number 2 fragrance is Meteor by Louis Vuitton. I wore all of that. So it looks like I wore about 20 to 30% of the fragrance already. I put a really nice dent in this, and I had this since July or August, something like that. I felt compelled to purchase it after reading a few reviews and watching a few reviews, and I had tried it a while ago along with Imagination and City of Stars and Afternoon Swim, and I said, you know what, I want to purchase this one. I think I'm gonna end up wearing it. It actually happens to be my scent of the day today. I said to myself, I think I'm gonna end up wearing it a lot, and I sure did. I wore it all throughout the summer. That, along with, believe it or not, Gucci Guilty. Gucci Guilty could have very well made its way into this list. If I ever decide to do a part 2 of this list, it will definitely be in there. And the fragrance in the number 1 spot is probably the fragrance that surprised me the most for a few different reasons. Number 1, it's probably the most recent release from this entire list. So the fact that it came out so recently, yet I already wore so much of it, I think is quite a surprise. Number 2, a lot of people don't like this fragrance. For whatever reason, they just thought that it was too plain. plain or too safe, or it wasn't as dark and heavy and challenging as some of the other fragrances that this brand has put out. I don't really care. I just want to smell good. I want to get complimented. I want people to not be offended by my fragrance. And I want something with this sort of utilitarian, easy to wear, approachable demeanor. And I feel like this fragrance really did that. I wore about half of my bottle already, which is a shock. And I really wasn't expecting this. I bought it off of the brand's website by Frederick Malle. It's called Uncut Gem. If you take a look at my bottle, I think I wore about, honestly, it's closer to 40% or something like that. And I bring this with me to work. I do about 5 or 6 sprays in the morning. I spray some more on around lunchtime, which is like 11:30 or noon. And this stuff smells amazing. This sort of ambroxan, it has this angelica root note in here. It's very citrusy. It's a little herbal. It has this tartness in the opening, but this really long-lasting muskiness in the base. It just smells really sophisticated, really classy, a bit edgy. At the same time, I personally love Uncut Gem. There's a lot of other Frederick Malle fragrances that people really like that I don't care for, like Promise or The Night or Dawn, or, there's a lot of really heavy fragrances that I just never personally fell in love with, but there's something about Uncut Gem that really did it for me, and it actually ended up being, despite the fact that it's a new release, it ended up being one of my most worn, actually my most worn fragrance of 2022. And I surmise that by 2023, I would say by the summer, I'll probably run out of my bottle and I'll have to purchase a new one. But thank you all so much for watching this video. I really do appreciate it. Leave a comment down below. Let me know what have been your most worn fragrances for 2022. Always love the interaction. Also, if you enjoyed this video, support the channel by subscribing to it, hit the bell, give it a thumbs up. Love you guys, and we'll see you tomorrow. Bye.